Today, I want to tell you about a woman named Elena. It's a story about the kind of loneliness that doesn't look like loneliness. It's about the silence that can drown a family and the unexpected lifeline that pulled them back to the surface. Before we dive into today's story, please take a second to hit that subscribe button. I share stories here that aren't just entertainment. They are reflections of the messy, beautiful, real lives we lead. Stories that stay with you in the quiet moments. At 42, Elena looked like she had won the lottery of life. If you looked at her social media or drove past her house, you'd see perfection. She lived in a sprawling, pristine home in the suburbs. She had a husband, Richard, who was a high-powered tech executive, and a 21-year-old son, Caleb, who was fiercely independent. But appearances are often just a well-painted fence hiding a crumbling garden. Elena felt like she was living in a museum. Everything was valuable. Everything was in its place, but nothing could be touched, and the air was always a little too cold. Richard, her husband, was the architect of their stability. He was a good man on paper. He paid the bills, funded vacations, and ensured their future was secure. But Richard didn't live in the present. He lived in his laptop, in overseas conference calls, in the fluctuating stock market. Even when he was sitting at the dinner table, he was 1,000 miles away. Elena would ask, "How was your day?" And he would answer with a grunt, eyes never leaving his screen. She became a ghost in her own hallway, drifting past him, starving for a conversation that went deeper than the weather or the grocery list. Then there was Caleb. Caleb was the opposite of his father. He was chaotic, vibrant, and refused to wear a suit and tie. Instead of college, he chose to work in landscape design. He came home every day smelling of soil and rain, his hands rough, but his spirit alive. Elena was proud of him, but she also felt a pang of anxiety. She watched him carry the weight of his own bills and responsibilities, terrified that the world would crush his spirit just like the silence was crushing hers. It was a scorching August that changed everything. It was the kind of heat that hangs heavy in the air, making the asphalt shimmer and the world move in slow motion. Richard had left for a 10-day conference in Tokyo. The house was suddenly cavernous. Just Elena, the humming of the air conditioner, and the oppressive quiet. For the first 3 days, Elena barely spoke a word out loud. She realized with a jolt of panic that she didn't know who she was any more outside of being a wife to an absent husband and a mother to a grown son. One Tuesday afternoon, the heat broke into a violent summer storm. The sky turned bruised and purple, and rain lashed against the windows. Caleb came home early, his truck muddy, his clothes soaked through. He walked into the kitchen where Elena was staring blankly at a cup of cold tea. "Mom? You okay?" he asked, shaking his wet hair like a dog. "I'm fine," she lied automatically. "Just watching the storm." The power suddenly cut out. The hum of the refrigerator died. The lights vanished. The house was plunged into a gray, watery twilight. "Well," Caleb laughed, "looks like we're stuck." He found some old candles in a drawer and lit them, placing them on the kitchen island. The flickering light changed the room. It softened the sharp edges of their modern kitchen. For the first time in years, there were no distractions. No TV, no Wi-Fi, no Richard checking emails. They sat on the floor by the candlelight, eating sandwiches. And they started to talk. Not the usual clean your room or drive safe talk. They talked about memories. Caleb asked her about her life before she met his father. He asked about her dreams that she had shelved to build this family. "You know," Caleb said quietly, watching a candle flicker, "I hate this house sometimes." Elena looked up shocked. "Why?" "Because it feels like a waiting room," he said, his voice raw. "We're all just waiting for Dad to look up. Waiting for something to happen. It's lonely, Mom. I see you walking around here, and you look fading." His honesty hit her like a physical blow. She realized he had been watching her just as closely as she watched him. "I feel it too," she whispered, the tears finally spilling over. "I feel like I'm invisible." Caleb didn't offer a cliché solution. He didn't tell her it would get better. He simply reached out and held her hand. It wasn't a child needing a mother. It was two human beings acknowledging a shared pain. "I've been thinking about moving out," Caleb admitted. But I've stayed because I didn't want to leave you here alone with the silence. That broke her heart and healed it at the same time. She realized that she had been leaning on her son to fill the emotional void her husband had left. She was turning her son into her emotional partner, and that was a burden no child should carry. You can't stay for me, Caleb, she said, squeezing his hand. You have to live your life, and I have to fix mine. That night, in the dark, something shifted. The dynamic of the family was rewritten. When Richard returned a week later, the house felt different. It wasn't hostile, but it was firm. Elena didn't greet him with the usual passive smile. That evening, after dinner, she sat Richard down. Caleb was out with friends. Elena had insisted he go. This was her battle. Richard, look at me, she said. He glanced up from his phone, annoyed. I'm listening. No, she said, gently taking the phone from his hand and placing it face down on the table. You're hearing me, but you aren't seeing me. I am lonely, Richard. Our son stayed in this house longer than he wanted to because he was afraid I would crumble if he left. We have money, we have safety, but we don't have a marriage. I need that to change or I cannot stay. For the first time in a decade, Richard saw the woman in front of him. He saw the fatigue in her eyes and the resolve in her posture. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was heavy with realization. I didn't know, he whispered. I thought I was doing everything right by providing. You provided a house, Elena said softly. I need you to help me build a home. It wasn't a magical fix. There was no movie-style montage where everything was perfect the next day. But the work began. Richard agreed to marriage counseling. He set a hard rule, no phones at the dinner table. He started learning to be present, to actually listen to the answers when he asked, "How was your day?" 2 months later, Caleb moved into a small apartment downtown. It was small and messy, but it was his. Elena visited him a few weeks after the move. She sat on his mismatched sofa, drinking coffee from a chipped mug. How are things at the big house? Caleb asked. Better, Elena smiled. And she meant it. Your dad and I went for a walk yesterday. Just a walk. No destination. We talked for an hour. Caleb smiled, a look of relief washing over his face. I'm glad, Mom. Elena drove home that evening with the windows down, letting the wind mess up her hair. She realized that by speaking up, by admitting her vulnerability, she hadn't destroyed her family. She had saved it. She learned that emotional boundaries are just as important as physical walls. She learned that it is not a child's job to heal their parents' loneliness. And most importantly, she learned that it is never too late to demand to be seen. My friends, if this story resonated with you, I want you to look at your own life. Are you drifting through your own home like a ghost? Are you leaning on someone who shouldn't have to carry your burdens? Silence is safe, but it is also deadly to a relationship. Don't wait for the power to go out or a storm to trap you to speak your truth. Break the silence before the silence breaks you. Thank you for listening. If you found value in this story, please subscribe and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Until next time, take care of your heart.